What if I told you that one Family Feud episode turned a simple wedding-themed game into one of the most unforgettable and tense moments in the show's history? Welcome to Harvey's Highlights. Make sure you subscribe so you never miss the jaw-dropping stories we dive into here. On this particular episode, the energy in the studio was festive, lighthearted, and full of anticipation. The theme was weddings, and both teams were excited to showcase their knowledge of bridal traditions, honeymoon destinations, and etiquette. Steve Harvey, as always, was ready to guide the fun, cracking jokes and teasing contestants with his trademark humor. "I hope everybody brought their A game." Steve started with a grin, scanning the contestants. "Because we don't just play for points here. We play for bragging rights. And maybe a little bit of humility if you lose." The game began smoothly, with laughter echoing throughout the studio as the first few questions were answered. But as the second round approached, tension started bubbling beneath the surface. The bride-to-be, Jessica, was on the hot seat, answering questions confidently, while her mother-in-law, Sharon, sat poised in the audience with an intense glare that seemed to pierce through every answer. Steve leaned in, sensing the growing tension. "Y'all, I feel some serious vibes coming from that side. Sharon, you okay over there?" he joked. But the humor didn't land as expected. Sharon, without missing a beat, leaned toward the microphone and muttered something that would change the tone of the entire episode. "I just hope she doesn't ruin our family's reputation on national television," Sharon said quietly but audibly enough for a few nearby microphones to pick up. The words hit Jessica like a punch. Her eyes widened, her jaw tightened, and the color drained from her face. She turned toward her team, whispered something under her breath, and before anyone could stop her, she stood up abruptly. "I'm done," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "I can't do this." And with that, she stormed off the stage, her chair clattering behind her. The audience gasped. Whispers and murmurs filled the studio as Steve's laughter died on his lips. Wait, wait," he said, trying to process what had just happened. "Hold on. Did she just walk off?" Steve immediately signaled for a commercial break. The producers scrambled, trying to calm everyone and figure out how to proceed. Steve, however, was visibly shaken. He leaned on the edge of the stage, muttering to himself, "I've seen a lot on this show, but this takes the cake." Jessica's teammates were stunned, staring at the empty chair where she had been moments ago. Meanwhile, Sharon sat frozen, realizing the weight of her words. Steve walked over, kneeling slightly to meet her eyes. "Ma'am, you realize what you just did?" he asked quietly but firmly. Sharon tried to explain herself, but the tension had reached a boiling point. Steve raised his hands and let out a frustrated laugh, rubbing his temples. "I cannot believe this," he muttered, shaking his head. "We're supposed to be having fun, celebrating life. Not this." The cameras captured every second, the shock, the whispers, the awkward silence. It was a rare moment where the humor and chaos of Family Feud collided with raw, real human emotion. As the cameras remained rolling, Steve Harvey took a deep breath, trying to regain his composure. The audience was buzzing with confusion, some murmuring their support for Jessica, others whispering about Sharon's comment. Steve glanced around the studio, his eyes narrowing slightly as he addressed everyone. "Everybody, let's just pause for a second," Steve said, raising his hands. "This is not how Family Feud works. We come here to have fun, to laugh, to compete, and to share moments, not to tear each other down." Jessica's teammates were still seated, glancing nervously at her empty chair. Finally, one of them, her sister, stood up and spoke. "Steve, she's really upset. That comment from her mother-in-law. It hurt. She doesn't want to play anymore." Steve nodded slowly, pacing a few steps across the stage. "I get it. I understand that words can hurt. But this is live television. We have families watching, kids watching, people trying to enjoy a game show. You just can't throw a tantrum and walk off." Sharon, the mother-in-law, finally spoke, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean, I thought I was joking, you know?" she said, her eyes darting around the room. Steve looked at her for a long moment, his expression a mixture of disbelief and patience. "Joking?" he repeated. "Do you understand that your little joke just ruined your daughter-in-law's moment? And not just that, you made me stop the show." The studio audience gasped again, some whispering "wow" under their breath. Steve took a step closer to Sharon, lowering his voice but keeping it firm. "You can't just say things like that and expect everyone to laugh it off. We're here to celebrate people's lives, their love, their families, not to cause drama." Behind the cameras, producers were frantically trying to figure out what to do. Should they cut to commercials? Should they try to get Jessica back on stage? Steve, however, wasn't waiting for instructions. He turned to the audience, shaking his head. "I've been doing this show for years," Steve said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "And I've seen arguments, I've seen fights, I've seen people upset. But I've never seen someone's heart hurt like this on national television over a comment like that." Jessica, meanwhile, had paused in the hallway outside the stage. Tears welled in her eyes as she tried to collect herself. Her fiancé, sensing her distress, ran after her. "Jess, come back. We can do this together," he said softly. Jessica shook her head. "I can't. Not after what she said. I can't." Steve watched from the stage, feeling the weight of the situation. He turned to the cameras and addressed the viewers at home, his tone calm but serious. "Folks, sometimes we think it's just a game, just a joke, just a comment. But for the people involved, it's real life, real feelings. And that's what makes moments like this so powerful. Real people, real emotions. Right here on Family Feud." The studio was silent, the tension palpable. Even the other contestants seemed unsure how to react. Steve finally rubbed his forehead and muttered, "All right, let's just take a deep breath." The incident had shaken everyone, but it also reminded them all, Steve included, why emotions are such an integral part of the show. Family Feud wasn't just about points or prizes. It was about connection, about understanding, about the moments that catch you off guard and leave a lasting impression. After a brief pause, Steve Harvey took a step toward the empty chair where Jessica had been sitting. The studio was quiet, the audience leaning forward, sensing the gravity of the moment. Steve's voice was measured but carried the weight of authority and empathy. "Jessica," he said, projecting to both the hallway and the cameras, "I don't want anyone to think this is just about a game. This is about respect. This is about family. And right now, I see a young woman who feels hurt, who feels disrespected, and I understand that. I really do." Sharon, still seated awkwardly, shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Steve turned his attention to her. "And you need to understand the impact of your words. It may have seemed small to you, but it's not small to her. Families are complicated. Jokes can be dangerous when they touch on something personal. Right now, your daughter-in-law is upset because of something you said." Sharon's voice wavered. I didn't think. I just meant it as teasing," she said, looking at Steve with a mix of guilt and confusion. Steve nodded slowly, his expression softening slightly. "I know you meant it as teasing, but life isn't always about intention. Sometimes it's about the effect. And the effect here? Pain. Hurt feelings. A game show turned into a moment of heartbreak. That's why I stopped the show. That's why I walked over here and addressed this." Meanwhile, Jessica's fiancé returned to the stage, gently holding her hand. "Jessica, I know it stung. I know it hurt, but maybe we can work through this. Together." Jessica hesitated, looking back at Sharon, her emotions conflicted. I don't know if I can," she whispered, her voice trembling. Steve walked closer, placing a hand on his hip, his eyes scanning both women. "Listen, we don't have to pretend everything is perfect. This is live TV, real life is messy. But we do have a choice. We can let this break us, or we can try to fix it." One of the producers finally spoke up from behind the cameras, cautiously. "Steve, maybe we can give them a moment. Bring Jessica back in, continue the game?" Steve shook his head. "Not yet. Not until the respect is restored." This isn't about the game anymore, it's about the people. And right now, that young woman's feelings come first. That's what Family Feud is really about. From the audience, someone whispered, "Wow, Steve's really handling this." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Jessica's sister finally intervened gently, trying to bridge the gap. "Mom, maybe you can say something. Just apologize. That might help." Sharon took a shaky breath, glancing at Jessica. "Jessica, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. It was a joke, but I see now it went too far. I really am sorry." Steve Harvey exhaled, letting a bit of the tension release. "That's a start. That's a start," he said, nodding slowly. "Sometimes we need to hear it said out loud. Sometimes words matter more than we realize." The audience shifted in their seats, sensing the fragile truce forming. Cameras remained on, capturing this very human moment, one that no scripted game could replicate. Steve finally turned to the camera, addressing viewers at home. Families fight. Families disagree. Families hurt each other sometimes. But what we saw today, this is a lesson. Respect each other. Think before you speak. And know that words have power. Jessica took a deep breath, squeezing her fiancé's hand, then looked toward her mother-in-law. "Thank you for apologizing," she said quietly. Sharon nodded, her eyes glistening. "Thank you for forgiving me, Jessica." Steve Harvey clapped his hands once and smiled softly. "All right, let's try to get back to the game. But remember, folks, the game is never more important than the heart." With the tension finally easing, Steve Harvey motioned for the contestants to regroup. The audience, still quiet from the intensity of the moment, slowly began to applaud, showing their support not for the game, but for the resolution unfolding before them. Steve turned toward Jessica and her fiancé, his voice gentle but firm. "Now let's be clear. No one is perfect. No family is perfect. But what matters is how you handle it when things go wrong. That's the lesson here today." Jessica took a deep breath and tried to smile. I didn't expect it to get so bad on TV," she admitted. Her fiancé nodded, squeezing her hand. "Neither did we. But maybe this helps. Seeing it in front of everyone. Maybe it makes it real." Sharon, looking remorseful, added, "I never thought my words would affect you this way. I understand now. I promise I'll be more careful." Steve Harvey raised a hand, emphasizing his point. "See that right there? That's what I'm talking about. Real life lessons straight from a game show. The cameras don't lie. The audience sees it. And sometimes, what happens on stage is bigger than the game itself." He pivoted back to the families on stage. "Now, I know you all came here to play Family Feud, to have fun, to maybe win some money. But life threw you a curveball today. And you handled it the only way you could, with honesty. With a little pain, maybe, but also with the opportunity to forgive and move forward." A young contestant from another family in the audience shouted, "That's real." The audience murmured in agreement, nodding. Steve smiled. "Exactly. That's real. And that's why this show isn't just about guessing the top answers. It's about people. Real people. And sometimes that means stopping everything and dealing with what matters most first. The heart." Steve then walked toward the board, his tone lighter but still instructive. "All right, now that we've reminded everyone that words matter, let's get back to the game. But remember what we just saw, what we just lived through. It's bigger than any points, any prizes. Keep that in mind every time you speak to someone, especially the ones you love." Jessica, still emotional, managed a small laugh. "I guess this is a family feud I'll never forget," she said. Her fiancé chuckled, nodding. "Definitely not what we expected when we signed up for today." Steve laughed along with them, shaking his head. "You never know what's going to happen here. And that's the truth. One minute you're playing a game. The next you're learning life lessons, right here on stage." Sharon, still holding back tears, nodded. "Thank you, Steve. I get it now. Really." Steve looked into the camera, his signature smile returning. "Folks at home, remember this. Family can be messy. Emotions can run high. But respect, understanding, and a little humility go a long way. That's a family feud moment that no one will forget. The audience erupted in applause, cheering for both the resolution and the resilience shown by everyone on stage. Steve Harvey clapped along, his voice warm. All right, now let's play some Family Feud. As the tension finally began to ease, Steve Harvey guided everyone back into a semblance of normalcy. All right, now let's get back to the game. But let's remember everything we just witnessed here. Life lessons don't take a commercial break, he said, his voice both commanding and compassionate. Jessica and her fiancé exchanged a small smile, still shaken but clearly relieved. Steve walked over to them and leaned in slightly. You handled that well. Nobody's perfect, but you faced it. That's what counts. You got each other's backs, and that's all that matters. Sharon, still sitting with her head slightly bowed, took a deep breath and spoke. I didn't realize how much my words could hurt. I just want you to know I'm sorry. Steve nodded, placing a hand over his heart. And that's exactly what we want to hear. Apologies are powerful, but actions after the apology? That's what proves it. He turned to the audience, who had been watching the whole time with rapt attention. See, this is why I love this show. You think it's just a game, just some laughs, but moments like this? They're real. And real is what matters. Then he glanced at the contestant families. Life is unpredictable. Sometimes, a simple question, a small answer, or even a disagreement can bring up everything you didn't know was buried. But it's not about winning the money today, it's about how you leave this stage. And judging by what I just saw, there's growth, understanding, and maybe even a little peace. Jessica's fiancé chuckled nervously. I don't know if I'll ever forget this day, he admitted. Steve laughed, shaking his head. Oh, you're not alone. The cameras didn't lie today. Everybody at home saw it. And folks, you know what? That's the beauty of this show. We see people at their best, their worst, and everything in between, all while having a little fun along the way. He clapped his hands and smiled. Now we're gonna finish the game. But remember this moment. Remember that respect, patience, and honesty matter more than any points on the board. Treat people well, especially your family, and the rest will follow. Sharon wiped a tear from her eye, finally smiling faintly. Thank you, Steve. I really do understand now. Steve looked at her, nodding sincerely. Good. That's all I needed to hear. Words have weight, people. Sometimes heavier than you expect. And today we all learned just how heavy and how important they can be. The audience began to cheer, clapping for both the resolution and the emotional journey they had just witnessed. Steve clapped along, chuckling. All right, now let's get back to some Family Feud fun. But never forget, the game can always wait. The heart cannot. As the show transitioned back into the typical rounds of laughter, guessing, and friendly competition, the intensity of the earlier moment lingered. Viewers at home, like those in the studio, were reminded that beneath the jokes and games, Family Feud is about people, relationships, and sometimes life lessons that hit harder than any prize. Steve concluded with his signature grin. You never know what's going to happen here, folks. One minute you're playing a game, the next you're learning about life, love, and family. That's Family Feud for you. Fun, unpredictable, and real. The applause continued, and the camera panned across the families, capturing their smiles, relief, and renewed connections. The show, for all its chaos and laughter, had become a stage for something far bigger than points or prizes. A reminder that honesty, compassion, and communication truly matter. That was the last part of this story.